is May Sebel, and I'm interviewing Nancy Jellinek for her oral history on Saturday, August 1st, 2020. So, where were you born?
I was born in Dallas, Texas at Florence Nightingale Hospital.
Okay, all right. How did your family, was your family from here?
My dad was from New York, and my mother and her remaining unmarried siblings, girls, and my grandmother moved here from Tyler, Texas.
Oh.
When they were growing up in Tyler, Texas, there were 3 synagogues there. There was Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox.
That's right. And which one did they belong to?
My grandparents belonged to the Orthodox, and my mother and her sisters belonged to the Temple because apparently that's where the boys were. What can I say?
Okay.
That's not the way it is anymore, by the way. All the boys are over in the Orthodox world.
Oh.
Have you ever noticed that? Anyway.
So, how far back do you know of your family's history?
I probably know I know into my grandparents' lives for sure. And that being said, they're a little bit of their parents. So that would be my great-grandparents. And that's as far back as I know.
Tell me about them.
My mother's mother was born in Ukraine, and they immigrated, turn of the century. She married and had 2 girls, and she was literally working in one of those sweatshops on the Lower East Side. And apparently that husband didn't work, and she supported them with what she made in a sweatshop. And so she divorced him. My grandmother was a modern woman, and she divorced him, and her brothers ended up in Texas, and they said, you need to move here. We know of a widower that we think you'd really like. And she came to Tyler, and she married my grandfather, and he owned a grocery store in Tyler, Texas. He died before I was born, like a couple years before I was born, so I never knew him. He was a Klein. I think they were from Poland. And so that's my mother's side of the family. My dad's side of the family, who I think is really interesting, my great-grandfather, actually my grandfather's father, immigrated here in the mid-1800s, and he was a furrier. And then he moved to New York later. But my grandmother, her people came, at the typical time, early 1900s, and my great-grandfather was a jeweler. So when they came from Belgium and from Antwerp. And when they came, my grandmother spoke French and Flemish and Yiddish. She was little, she was 4, but she spoke 3 languages because that's what they spoke at home. And they came over, I think they brought a nanny with them. That all went away pretty quickly, but so they had kind of an interesting background too. My grandfather, the one whose father immigrated here, he was actually a Reformed Jew. He was born and raised Reform. And they lived in Manhattan, and he was the president of the Diamond Dealers Club in Manhattan. And I think the reason he had that job, because, the diamond industry was filled with Hasids. And my grandpa Max was a very elegant American. He was not a black hat. And so he could talk to the community at large, not just the Jewish community. And so he had that job until he passed away. he was adorable. I adored them. Those were my grandparents.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What is your earliest childhood memory?
My earliest memory, my New York grandparents, Max and Kitsy, they had an apartment in Manhattan, but by the time I came along, they had a house in upstate in a place called Mahopac, New York, and there was a lake right down the hill. And my earliest memory, and I don't know if it's because it was traumatic or because it was so much fun, probably because both, but my father and my grandfather wanted me to learn to swim, and so one of them would stand on the dock and toss me to the other one who was in the water, and so I got unafraid of the water in no time, and they taught me how to swim. I was swimming by the time I was probably a year and a half old, and I loved it. So that's the earliest thing I remember.
What was your favorite thing to do for fun as you were growing up?
Oh, no doubt about it. I would go spend all summer with Kitsy and Max, all summer until my grandfather died. So that was like the first 10 years of my life. And I would go up there, and I had a whole set of friends there, and I had some family. My mother had some sisters who had kids and lived there. I'm putting the dog down, he's falling. And so I had cousins, and I waited for the summer. I just love summers there. I was kind of surprised when my grandfather died and suddenly we were stuck in Texas for the summer and I had to deal with Texas summer. I didn't know what that was all about because I had never had to do that before. So they put me in sleepaway camp real fast so that at least I had something to go do.
Where did you go to sleepaway camp?
I went to Tres Rios, which was a Y camp outside of, close to Granbury.
Did you like camping?
I loved camp. You know, my cousin went to camp the same time I did, and she cried the whole time, and she's older than I am. But I loved it. I would have stayed all summer, but I don't know why.
What kind of sports did you get into at camp?
You know what I really loved was archery. I really just loved archery. I mean, we did the whole thing. We did all the races and everything else, but I was never fast, you know, so that wasn't anything for me. But I was okay at the hop, skip, and jump. I think I won some ribbons for hop, skip, and jump. Because I'm a dancer. So, of course, I could do hop, skip, and jump.
What were your favorite songs and music?
My favorite songs. You know, my earliest favorite song was Scheherazade. My dad was in the classical music, being a New Yorker who grew up going to the Met. And one of the first things he bought me on an album, you know, that was back when you had the little Aqua record players, and he bought me a 33, and it had Scheherazade, and I loved to dance, and so I would dance all over my room. I played that record. I mean, I just destroyed it after years of playing that record, but that was my favorite. And then, of course, rock and roll. I know all the words to all the songs, and loved rock and roll. My mother liked swing and big bands, so I knew a lot of that because she loved to dance. That's where I got the voice and the dancing. My dad was a good dancer too, from them, but it wasn't jazz. I know people that actually grew up and their parents like jazz. I think that is very avant-garde. So.
I know you have pets now and you love them. Did you have pets growing up?
We got a pet when I was 10. We got a beagle. That was back in everybody had to have a Snoopy. And his name was Buttons. I named him. And he was not the nicest little dog, but I loved him. And after he passed away, which was, I guess, I mean, he lived a while. I mean, I'd gone off to college. By my last year of college, I got my own dog, which was just crazy because I got a dog. I didn't have a fenced-in yard. It was in Austin, and I would every day ask my dog if she wanted to go to college with me, and we would just walk to school, and she would hang out and wait for me to get out of class. So I think of that now, and I have agita.
Let's switch gears here. What was your religious life growing up?
You know, I was born and raised at Emmanuel, and I went through religious school and was confirmed and was in the junior choir that Sam Adler conducted. And, you know, that girls didn't get bat mitzvahed in those days. They really didn't. So I never did that. But you know, I always liked it. And my dad would take me, my cousins, and I lived near the Blums, and he'd pick them up and he'd take us all to religious school. And he would go to Rabbi Olin's Bible study class while we were all in regular religious school. They were not all that religious. But I remember after I came back from Austin, I was in Austin a long time, but when I came back, you know, my family would have a first night Seder, the whole family. And then after that, I said, why don't we do a second night Seder? And we could do, it wasn't the 10 minutes started, let's eat kind of Seder that my family always did. And so we did a real Seder, and my folks loved it. So as happens to a lot of people, they got really more spiritual and more religious as they got older. And that was nice. That was really nice. But I always loved music, and I always sang. So I was always kind of going that route. And so that's what we did. You know, I am someone who loves the way Judaism has, Reform Judaism has grown, because it's so much more heartfelt, I think. And, but then I'm not just into the Torah study kind of person. So I'm more experiential. But that's what I did. I loved, when I went to Texas, Rabbi Olin was a trustee. And every once in a while, I'd be walking across campus with my friends, and I would hear a booming voice say, Mademoiselle Jellinek, because, you know, you told Rabbi Olin anything, and he was like an elephant. He never forgot. So he knew I had taken French in high school. So he would talk French to me, because I don't even know how many languages that man knew. But I always loved him and loved listening to him and studying with him. And I know he scared some people, but not the kids that grew up with him. He didn't scare us. So it was really great. I feel so blessed to have studied with such giants in music and in theology, you know, when I was growing up, because Sam Adler is still huge in the Jewish liturgical music world, composer. So
that was perfect for you. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
What world events had the most impact on you when you were growing up?
I think, well, I saw John Kennedy the day he was shot. I mean, I was so, we were on the route, and my grandmother was with me, and the car came very slowly by me on Lemon Avenue, and it was so close, my grandmother kind of had to yank me out of the way because she was afraid it would run over my foot. And John and Jackie saw that, and they smiled at me. That was a huge
Oh my gosh.
It was huge. And then finding out he was shot like an hour later just broke my heart. So a lot of things impacted me that were sad. So when I graduated was the year that Bobby Kennedy was shot and Martin Luther King was shot. And it put this whole spin on the world, kind of like I'm going through now, you know, of what is going on here, you know, how could it be like this? So those were big world events, I think.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Did your family have special traditions with holidays like birthdays or the high holy days?
Well, you know, my mother had 3 sisters here, and so we always did holidays with them, and those families. We did birthday. I mean, we really saw each other every Sunday. That was in the old days, and that was nice. It was nice having that, you know, because I'm an only child, so having that kind of extended family was really reassuring and good. And we did, you know, we always did dinner before Rosh Hashanah and dinner before Yom Kippur, so that, you know, we could fast the next day. And we did Passover. As with any Jewish family, Passover is a big deal. I don't think I knew how to celebrate Sukkot. I didn't know that Shavuot existed, or if it did, why. You know, it was not the most knowledgeable Jewish family. But I learned, you know, it's okay. That's what adulthood was for me, is learning. But yeah, there was a lot. I just learned something today at services. You know, Tisha B'Av started Wednesday night, was Wednesday and Thursday. And then there was a Tu B'Shvat. Anyway, it's a celebration of love. So, and it's no mistake that they made it 3 days or 2 days after Tisha B'Av, which is all about sadness and loss. And then this holiday is all about love, which, I mean, it's like not Valentine's Day. It's like people, like married couples would go in the fields and dance in white robes together. I mean, just a lovely holiday. I'd never heard of it before. So that it's still learning. And when I moved back to Dallas, I did what I called synagogue hopping. I went from synagogue to synagogue. I went to conservative. I went to the other reform. I didn't go to, well, actually, I did go spend a Shabbaton with the Orthodox family, which was interesting. But I was looking for what would be my spiritual home. And I came back to Temple because they offered so much of what was important to me in social justice and in, let's see, who was, Rabbi Zimmerman was there then, and somebody who, someone who could inspire me, and the music. It's always been a great place for music. I didn't join the choir though until Cantor Cone came. So I participated in Lefkowitz with Rabbi Diamond. You know, it was Rabbi Diamond and I singing at Lefkowitz for years before Shirat Halev even started. And so, yeah, that was good.
Are there any stories about famous or infamous relatives in your family?
Oh, God. You know, there are, and there are. I don't know about was. There could have been, but I kind of hesitate to say anything because I believe they're still alive. But my grandmother, there's some people in my grandmother's family. One of them hired a FBI he thought it was a hitman to kill his wife. And he's a big real estate developer at the time, and he wanted out of that marriage. Had he ever heard the word divorce? I mean, seriously. We didn't really hang out with that family, but it wasn't an actual hitman. It was an FBI guy. So he went to jail for a long time. He was the one that built that really pretty mid-level thing on was it on Loma Alto that never opened? Do you know what I'm talking about, May?
No, I don't.
It was a real pretty building, and it was multi-story, probably 7 or 8 stories, and it was going to be apartments and not apartments, condos. And this is about 25 years ago, but it never opened because he didn't build it to code. So not only was he immoral, he was stupid. Anyhow.
We all have some interesting stories in our families about relatives, yes.
Yeah.
Are there any special heirlooms or photos or other memorabilia that's been passed down in your family?
I have a lot because my grandmother's people were jewelers, so I have some amazing jewelry that some of which I actually took it to the Antiques Roadshow to get, and I told them, I think my great-grandfather made this, and he actually could say he probably made this and he probably bought this here and I was like, how do you know that? And he said, because of the techniques they use in creating the piece, they use different ones in Europe than they did in America. So I learned a lot there. But so I have the jewelry, and my father was an only child, and I'm an only child. And my grandmother his mother was the only daughter. So a lot of stuff went down through her to my father to me. So I have the silver, and I have the wonderful ornate silver bowls. I have amazing china, and I have all that because it landed on me, you know. So when people say, they say your kids don't want your stuff, I'm like, I don't even have kids. So, I have to figure that out. But I do have remarkable stuff. I have great photos. In fact, you want to see a photo real quick?
Sure.
Okay, because it's right here. I just went and picked this up. Vicki Redden is moving her office, and I don't know how the hell this got there. Is that too reflective? Can you see that? Here.
Now we can see it. Now, so who is this? Tell us who this is.
The one in front, that's my Aunt Dorothy Boris. And the one behind her is my mom. I think Dorothy was 15 and my mother was 17 at the time. Isn't that gorgeous?
Oh, it's beautiful.
I thought so.
Thanks for sharing that with us. That's just beautiful.
Very beautiful. Well. I don't know how it ended up in Vicki's office. We were trying to figure that out. And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe Dorothy. Maybe I gave it to Aunt Dorothy, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad I've got it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But I have a lot of stuff like that. So,
of all the things you learned from your parents, which do you feel is the most valuable?
I think my dad was such a kind person. He was just amazingly kind, and he was so smart. So I learned a lot of stuff from my dad because he just remembered everything, and he was so brilliant. And my mother was her commitment to people and her energy and her commitment to, she was the first person to take food if someone was sick. I haven't lived up to that, by the way. She was remarkable with that, but just the whole idea of you take care of people when they're having a hard time, that definitely came from my mother. And plus she just loved to laugh. you know, about me, she worried all the time, but she was just loved to laugh and loved to talk to people. So I think I inherited that from her.
What did your dad do, by the way?
My dad was a manufacturer's rep in the clothing industry. It's probably not what he should have done. He probably should have been a teacher. I mean, he could. There's a whole thing about medical school, and he was in New York, and there were quotas for Jews. He would have been a good doctor, but that being taken off the board, not because of his grades, but because of quotas. He probably should have been a teacher because he loved to teach, and he would have been real happy. But I don't think he thought mother would have been happy. There was a lot of competition among the girls. So, but he taught a lot. I mean, Rabbi Richard Bernholz has told me several times I wouldn't be a rabbi if it hadn't been for your dad, because your dad got me through math, and I wouldn't have had the grades I did had he not helped. And so he would have been just a wonderful teacher. So that's what he did. My mother loved to work, and she was an assistant loan officer in Highland Park. And she loved to work. I mean, she worked way past when she should have because she just loved to work.
That's great. Mm-hmm. What accomplishments are you most proud of?
There are a few. I'm really proud. Going back, I had my own studio and shop, pottery studio and shop in Austin on 5th Street, and I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the Bosnia trip I took, the mission trip for women and children. I'm really proud of Shirat Halev. I'm proud that I led music and services at a major congregation, Reform congregation in the world for, I don't know, 15 years. I'm so proud of that. It was such a gift. Yeah. And I guess that's what comes to mind first.
What is the one thing you most want people to remember about you?
Oh, what a good question. I think that I want them to remember that I'm committed to justice, that I'm committed to people having great lives, to I guess that's it. That's good enough.
It certainly is. Well, this has been terrific. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Anything else? Let's see. Well, for Jewish history, my parents were married at my grandmother's house when my grandmother moved her unmarried daughters to Dallas in the hopes of finding them husbands, which they all did. She had, when my mother and my father got married, Rabbi Lefkowitz married them in my grandmother's house. So I have pictures of Rabbi Lefkowitz and my folks. And so it always made me smile, you know, in Lefkowitz Chapel, because although I never knew him, and I know he was a really great man, you know, he married my folks. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. My parents loved Temple, and they're not buried in the Temple Cemetery. They're buried across the fence at Sparkman Hillcrest because they wanted a place that was right next to Temple. So I remember telling one of the clergy that you know, that you can't say that's not an important area. That was before they put the garden in. Mother would have loved that. But, you know, they had the trash bins out there. And I was like, you can't do that. You can't have trash across the fence from people that went to temple. I mean, that's why they're there, is because they love temple. And I remember Rabbi Robbins went, wow, that's a really good point. So I take responsibility for moving all that stuff out. Now there's a garden there.
Oh, great. Nancy, thank you so much. This has been terrific.
You're very welcome. Oh, and I want people to remember I love dogs and cats.
Oh, yes.
I love dogs and cats. All right, that's all.
Yeah. Thank you.
All
now
right,
hang on for a while, because Jessica has something that both of us need to do, and I need to tell you a couple of things also.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Hey, kiddo.
So, Nancy, a couple of things.
Yeah.
I won every medal that the Camp Archery Association gives out when I was at Camp Mystic for 6 summers. So we definitely have that in common. And
I loved it.
I'm a Sagittarius. So
me too.
Well, see, the archer, it's perfect.
There you go.
What was your maiden name?
Thought about that.
Yeah, what was your maiden name?
Me?
Uh-huh.
I never married. I had some significant others. One that I was with for a couple decades, but I never married.
I was trying to think if I had known your folks, but I did not.
They're Jellinek.
Your Aunt Dorothy Boris,
mm-hmm.
Do you recall when she lived in a duplex on Berry Knoll?
Yeah, absolutely.
She rented from me. That was my duplex. I lived in one side and she lived in the other.
Oh, she was a hoot. My Aunt Dorothy
was lovely.
Something.
She was one of the loveliest tenants I ever had, because I had some that weren't so lovely, but she was lovely. But isn't that interesting?
She was a true modern woman. She was the only one in the family that actually went to university and got a degree. She reinvented herself like 2 or 3 times to do something else. She was hysterical. She was a funny lady.
She was lovely. She was lovely too.
Yeah.